The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.
Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Reinhard Scholler from the ITU, and I'm really excited to introduce to you today our new series on AI and finance as part of our AI for Good program. I'm thrilled to welcome Sarah Hammer, who is curating and moderating the series. Sarah works at Norton, one of the top business schools in the world, where she's an executive director. Sarah also teaches at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Now, Norton is famous for its amazing network of former students, its brilliant teachers and research, and for always coming up with new and exciting ways to teach. And Sarah is a perfect example of this spirit of innovation. She's had important roles at Wharton, like managing director at the Center for Innovation and Finance and senior director of the Alternative Investment Program. Right now, Sarah is focusing on financial technology and leading the Wharton Cypher Accelerating, helping big businesses use the latest technology. So very glad to have Sarah with us. And Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you now to introduce the series and our first guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to AI for Good for the opportunity to be here today. I'm so pleased to curate this series, and I'm looking forward to unpacking the really critical issues around AI in finance for good. I'm also very, very honored to introduce my friend and my colleague, Nimrod Barak, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know through my work at the Wharton School. It's a great pleasure to work with you, Nimrod, and I'm grateful to you for joining me. Nimrod is the global head of Citi Innovation Labs and Citi's Emerging Technologies Centers of Excellence. His large global organization, with a staff of more than 600 employees, spans across all regions with large innovation centers in New York, London, Singapore, Tel Aviv, and Dublin, and serves the entire firm. Citi Innovation Labs focuses on digital solutions, emerging technologies, and trans topics, and provides a broad range of services from end-to-end product delivery through startup programs and external innovation, venture investing, and more. Nimrod has a very esteemed career. He also established the firm's Emerging Technologies Centers of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence and Distributed Ledger Technology, which focus on setting standards and best practices for adoption of emerging technologies across the firm. In addition, Nimrod leads a large technology organization that supports the institutional clients group with mission-critical solutions for document management and digitization. This large unit provides cutting-edge solutions based on AI and NLP to support transformation and automation roadmaps of various business units across the firm. Nimrod joined Citi in early 2018 and has over 20 years of industry experience as an executive leader in technology and innovation. He also owns more than 25 patents in the enterprise software space in areas such as AI, big data, mobile, and knowledge management. Nimrod, it's been an honor and a pleasure to get to know you and work with you, and we are grateful to you for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Rena, and thank you for AI for Good. It's really a pleasure to be here and have this conversation around AI and finance, and we really want to both kind of give an overview of how AI is being applied in the finance space, but also specifically deep dive into kind of use cases and talk a little bit about how AI actually helps us to improve our efficiency as a bank and really transform different areas. And more importantly, help our clients and improve our client experience. So let me share my screen and start the presentation. So thank you, Sarah, again for the lovely introduction. So I'm Nimrod Barak. I'm the Global Head of Innovation Labs in the Emerging Technology Centers of Excellence. Just to add on a little bit more color on my organization, because I think it kind of explains some of the things I'm about to say in the presentation. The Innovation Labs specifically is an organization that is there to help the businesses to solve complex problems with focus on emerging technologies, AI being one of them, but it's also with, for example, distributed ledger technology and any other technology that in recent years has been categorized as an emerging tech. Our focus is really about those kind of complex problems. So the range of activities that we have within the Innovation Labs is everything from pure research, working with academic institutions, working with startup companies and vendors, but really also strengthening our abilities as a large global bank in terms of research to be better prepared for the future. That is some of the activities that we have there. In addition to that, it goes all the way to in the range of applied usage of those technologies. For example, in the AI space, it's really about building those use cases and taking them into production to help the businesses to build their capabilities, explore new usages of, for example, AI, and really help them transform their businesses. The Emerging Technology Centers of Excellence, just to explain, this is somewhat different than the Innovation Labs. The AI Center of Excellence that we've established in 2021, for example, is a separate organization that is there to set standards and best practices for how do we leverage those technologies. This is really about how do we enable the organization to scale with AI by really setting those standards across the different policies and different areas and different functions of the organization to ensure that we can actually tap into the potential and the capabilities of those technologies and really enable them at scale. So we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. So first, I want to talk really at high level about the benefits of emerging technologies and AI, specifically in the banking space. And of course, everybody's kind of aware of what it can do, but I want to really focus on some of them because it will be a good kind of preparation for our discussion about use cases. So I think there are a couple of key benefits, and this is not a comprehensive list of everything, but just a few of the key ones, a few key benefits for the usage of AI. And it starts from improving client experience. I think the one key thing for us, when we talk about AI for good, for example, our goal as a large global bank that serves thousands of clients, obviously, is first of all to improve their experience and improve the way they're doing business with us, and to help them improve with their financial goals, of course. So with that, improving client experience is one key thing. And when you think about use cases in that space, it goes across things like how do we improve their their experience throughout our digital channels, for example, with personalizing the experience and providing, chatbots and other things. We'll talk about those things. But overall, how smooth is the experience? How frictionless is it? How digital is it by nature? And I think AI helps us to a great extent with all those things, and we'll touch on some examples in the next slide. The second thing is gaining insights from unstructured data. The banking space obviously is an industry that is still very reliant on manual operations. There's still a lot of documents. If you think about, banks signing on a contract with a client and then ingesting it and processing it, there's still a lot of efforts around the back office operations and of banks and how we use unstructured data. Gaining those insights from unstructured data is so important because it allows us to automate, to improve the client experience, of course, to really streamline the operations and take them to the next level. Now, unstructured data doesn't need to be documents necessarily, but even if you think about the way we're interacting with clients through voice channels, through chat, through emails, our ability to process those and automate and generate insights is remarkably important for improving the client experience. So this is another key benefit of using AI, and we'll talk about some of those use cases more concretely. Then the next one is really empowering decision making. And for us as a bank, making decisions on behalf of our clients and for our clients every day is super important. AI really helps us to make much more sophisticated and intelligent decisions in real time, and making sure that we can do the best we can for our clients. For example, if we have more information at the hands of our advisors in terms of market predictions and those kind of things, they can help the clients make better investment decisions. If we have more data on clients and on their industry and on their kind of work with their clients, we can make better credit decisions in real time. So AI, and first and foremost, data is super important in order to empower decision making. There's another key kind of element to it. And then anomaly detection being another great kind of set of use cases. We'll talk about those, but different machine learning techniques that are out there really helps us to kind of detect anomalies. And this could be used in so many kind of different ways, from payment anomalies to AML and fraud and other kind of financial crime kind of use cases. The ability to detect anomalies in huge amounts of data, historical data that is transactional, really allows us to protect our clients in a better way. Faster decision making. This is somewhat related to the decision making empowerment that we discussed about. But AI really helps us to also not just scale, but accelerate some of the decision making. Again, with enrichment of data, with inference in real time. We'll talk about those. The next one is improving process efficiency, which from our perspective, when we talk about, for example, generative AI, there are some key use cases that are so important in terms of how do we improve our operations. That again, helps us to improve our client experience, helps us with those key goals that I spoke about at the beginning. But we found that AI is so important in automating those processes that is absolutely remarkable. And then last but not least, reducing human error, which kind of connects to some of those, but is also very important from our perspective. AI really helps us to not just automate different things and empower people to do better and smarter decisions, but actually to reduce human error and protect, again, the bank and its clients. So I want to go into a little bit more details and talk a little bit about some of the key use cases, and I'll touch on the actual technologies where possible, of course, to just explain how things work and what could be done and implemented in the finance world. So the way we're looking at the universe in general of use cases, now this is not, of course, an exhaustive list of use cases, but this is just to give a glimpse of what areas are critical and important in the finance world and how AI can actually help us improve and accelerate some of the innovation in some of the areas. So generally speaking, we look at the world as three kind of key categories. The first one is client engagement, which is everything that relates to how do we engage with clients, how do we improve the client experience. The second one is really about the operational efficiency. This relates to more digitization of processes, automation, really streamlining the operations that eventually also improves, of course, the client experience. but AI is really fundamental in this space. And last but not least, in the risk and controls or the governance, this is really about how do we protect the bank, improve our risk management, and so on. So those are the three kind of key categories. Of course, you can look at it from different views, and you would see out there in the web, different types of categorizations. But those three really are three that I use kind of more commonly as I think about the use cases that we have. So starting with client engagement, I think the first thing is really with how do we create new, of course, revenue opportunities? How do we improve, some of the products that we provide to clients, introduce new ones? And there's a few kind of key use cases that you can see over there. First, with how do we use AI for market predictions to understand where the market is heading? And from that perspective, providing better service to clients because we can give them a more accurate kind of insights, or at least kind of help them with their strategies and how do they do it, especially in the markets business. So when you think about capital markets, obviously, being able to understand where, for example, equity markets or commodity markets are heading is super important for us to kind of be able to provide services to our clients. So AI can definitely help us with market predictions and help us to understand where things would move either in the day kind of range or even months and years. It's super important to help clients make decisions. The next one is really with recommendation systems. Recommendation systems has been one of the key usages of AI. Even before Gen AI was introduced, this is one of the most kind of innovative and actually the most applied one that we've seen in the market for many years, with things like, for example, the Netflix kind of mechanisms for recommending us the next show to view, or with Spotify or any kind of consumer kind of technology that helps us to leverage historical data and make decisions about the future in terms of what would be relevant for us. In terms of machine learning, it uses different kind of types of techniques for segmenting clients, for clustering, and different other techniques to ensure that we can look at clients in certain kind of clusters or different types of profiles. And this is how, for example, Netflix and others kind of are working to ensure that based on our historical data and things that categorize our profile, recommendations come for kind of new and interesting opportunities for us. So recommendation systems have been an interesting use case in the banking space even before Gen AI. And it really helps our staff to be able to recommend clients, but also directly to clients, things that could be relevant and interesting for them. Things that relates to AI also in terms of the client experience on that front with better targeting is really with how can we deliver solutions that are cheaper and more accessible to larger audiences. So things that relates to, for example, robo advisory, things like chatbots that can replace the human where it makes sense for certain kind of use cases to reduce costs and make it more accessible. Those are things that are being explored more broadly in the finance world as well. The next section here is better customer experience. And I think this is one of the kind of more known ones, because these are things that as we interact with our banks that provide services to us, we see some of those things. And it's something that also goes across industries, so not just the banking space and the financial kind of industries. This goes really across. So chatbots, for example, are some of the most prominent kind of use cases, obviously. And we interact with our banks using chatbots already. This is something that, especially with the emergence of Gen AI, we will see more. We will be interacting with chatbots, which would be much more intelligent, obviously, and much more personalized. This is also very important because what Gen AI also helps us is really kind of make the experience much more personalized. We will see chatbots that really fit their language and tone to kind of our style and our mood and our kind of characteristics. And we will see those things evolve across industry and not just in the banking space. Virtual assistant in a similar fashion also helps us even internally to make decisions for our clients. So for example, if you think about us contacting our bank, virtual assistants would have the agents to provide you with a better experience. This would be done using, for example, knowledge base data retrieval, for example. So if the agent needs to very quickly and swiftly kind of look for the right answer through dozens of documents to provide you with the quickest and best answer, then they would be able to do it in no time. And that is exactly where AI could help us to provide better client experience. And this goes across not just the banking space, but really across sectors and industries. The next one is really hyper-personalization, which I think is going to be also one of the key things in the next few years across industries. AI really helps us, first of all, to make insights in real time based on huge amounts of data. And as our experience has become more digital, we collect not just the banking space, but every industry. We collect more data on clients, and we know we have more data points on the journeys they're making, the transactions they've done, the preferences in general. And all those things help us to be more accurate with how do we personalize the experience. So in the future, AI will help us to personalize our websites, our mobile kind of experience, personalize the way, of course, notifications and other things are being sent, and personalize even the actual experience by itself without asking too many questions and asking for different kind of types of settings, but really just seeing the patterns of behavior and knowing things about clients will be able to provide a much more seamless and easy kind of experience using personalization based on AI. Moving to the next category of operational efficiency, as mentioned, I think AI and Gen AI for us as a bank specifically is really about how can we improve and transform kind of the way we're doing our operations. And I think that would eventually also reflect in client engagement and client experience. This is a key thing for us. Starting from the automate and standardized process flows, there's many processes, obviously, that are still very manual or semi-manual that we have in the financial industry and specifically in the banking space. And AI really helps us to take it to the next level and digitize those. Some examples are, for example, reconciliation. For those who are not familiar, reconciliation in the banking space, it goes into many types of use cases, but generally speaking, it's about how do we take two sets of data that represent the same transaction. For example, if we made a transaction, a sale on behalf of a client, then we have the view that we have within our internal system, and we have the view of the market or the exchange or the counterparty in that example. And how do we bring those two to ensure that we can do settlement based on the same understanding of the data that was leveraged in this transaction? So reconciliation is such a fundamental process in the financial sector that, and for years, it was a very, very manual or semi-manual with rule-based systems to ensure that, for example, we are able to match certain kind of data elements in one side and in the other, but it couldn't reach the true kind of automation that was expected from this space to ensure that we can do business faster and more efficient. But AI really helps us to do it. So for example, using different types of deep learning techniques, we are able to match huge data sets and reconcile them against each other in ways that even for a human, it would be very, very hard. And that reduces the need for manual operations, and it will be saved only for those very, very complex breaks. Those are the kind of use cases that we can see across the industry with such fundamental processes. CRM updates is another one. So how can we enrich, for example, our CRM database with data coming from clients based on different data that we're collecting? AI really helps us to do that in a smart way. And if you think about it, AI really is a key kind of an important set of technologies within our data strategy in general. So if we think about data quality, data completeness, all those things, AI really helps us to solve those things. The next one is data extraction from unstructured content to increase automation. This is truly one of the key kind of use cases in the banking space because, as mentioned, we are very document heavy, and still there's a lot of manual operations. And the ability to extract data from those documents to automate processes is super and fundamentally kind of important to improve the automation and to reduce error. But this is not just from documents, it's also from chats. So our ability to, for example, generate insights from chats with clients to make the process and the experience much more smoother. This is also some of the things that are being explored. Translation of documents in real time. This is also something that, especially with Gen AI, becomes much more, let's say, easier. Of course, there are things that needs to be solved and technology need to be mature, much more mature than now. But in general, our ability to translate documents in real time and process them helps us with processes, for example, like KYC. So if you think about the Know Your Client process, which is really about when we're doing business with a new client, for example, but even with existing, we need to collect certain types of documents about them, about certain kind of seniors in the organization and other kind of aspects. Collecting this data and understanding it in real time helps us to improve our client experience and, from our perspective, make ourselves more efficient. The next category is really reducing errors, fraud, and I think we spoke about anomaly detection. How does it help us, for example, when we think about payment, to identify anomalies and really kind of protect the clients if any kind of suspicious activity is being done. It also helps us in other kind of spaces from financial crime and others, but we kind of mentioned that. And last but not least, risk and control as a category. I think AI has been one of the key kind of, this has been one of the key use cases when you think about kind of banks, and one of the first areas that AI was adopted was basically in the fraud space, and how can we help protect transactions in our clients. So I think risk and controls would definitely continue to be one of the key kind of use cases in the coming years for AI. So in terms of the first section here of increased oversight and compliance, AI tools can help us to boost the efficiency of compliance operations. So helping us to identify internally any kind of violation of any policy from a compliance standpoint, that is a great use case. And then fraud detection and AML, we spoke about this. Our ability to, for example, in the AML space, to identify anomalous kind of activity in client accounts, help us to understand if there's any kind of potential risk. And that helps us to both adhere to regulatory kind of requirements, but also protect our clients. But techniques from a machine learning standpoint, like anomaly detection, especially in conjunction with rule-based kind of techniques, helps us to identify any kind of suspicious activity between accounts, money movements, and so on, and ensure that we are protecting our bank and our clients. So this is more broadly in finance, some of the examples that you can, just to give a sense of how AI can be used across the industry, amongst the banks in this space. So I want to talk about Gen AI, because we cannot have this session and talk about AI without talking about Gen AI, of course. So when we think about Gen AI, of course, we just celebrated a year since the introduction of ChatGPT in November last year. And that was truly a very historical moment for us as an industry in general, but also specifically in the banking space. So I wanted to talk a little bit before I deep dive into what are the key kind of use cases that we're seeing with generative AI. Why is it even interesting, and how is it very, very kind of different than what we had before with AI? So first of all, the adoption is one of the key things, and it relates to some of the things I'm going to say after this. So if you look historically about popular technologies and what kind of was the speed of adoption, you can see that some of the most known and more broadly adopted kind of technologies took years to get to kind of massive adoption. So if you look at the left-hand side, the number of years to reach 50 million users, technologies like Facebook and YouTube took 3 and 4 years to get to 50 million users, whereas ChatGPT took less than a month to reach the same number. And I think that is truly remarkable. And of course, we can, there's many explanations for that, but generally speaking, the fact that it took that it was so fast means so many kind of different things. I think the number one thing here, and the reason why it was so widely adopted, is because it was the first time that people, consumers from all kind of backgrounds, were able to understand how AI can actually help them on day-to-day basis. So if before that, AI has been there since the 50s or 60s, and there was a lot of hype around it in the past as well, but nobody really understood outside of, let's say, the tech industry or other specific industries, research and others. Nobody really understood how can it really kind of help them. Everybody understood this is something sophisticated, will come in the future. But I think this was the first time that everybody really understood how can it help them? How can they use it for their day-to-day? Whether it's finding recommendations for their next kind of trip to somewhere in Europe, or any kind of help with their homework or things that relates to their the way they're kind of creating documents, or to music or poetry, or to any kind of basically industry. So I think that's the most remarkable thing. And why does it affect kind of banking? First of all, because of the great power of this technology, but also because the way we're thinking about data and how do we consume it has somewhat changed. And our consumers and also our employees would expect, the same kind of revolution in terms of how data and specifically financial kind of, services are being provided, but also in terms of our employees, how they are consuming data and working for their clients. And we'll talk about that. So I wanted to also add on top of that 5 key reasons for why AI has accelerated now, and what are the kind of different environmental aspects that were present in the past few years that really helped this adoption, not of just ChatGPT, but led into this kind of hype that we're in at the moment. The first one is really the increase in compute power, which really helped us to accelerate some of those things. So ChatGPT could not be introduced, and generally speaking, large language models and foundational models could not be trained or reach the same kind of accuracy level that they have if we didn't have this increase in compute power. And the accessibility of this power and the ability to scale it up nothing would have been available if we didn't have it. The second thing is more data driven by consumers and devices and internet. I think this is also very kind of important. So without collecting a lot of data, without having this rich kind of data set, none of those LLMs would have been as accurate, again, as far as they are. So of course, ChatGPT was trained on a bigger part of the internet. And that is exactly why it's so accurate, because it was trained on such a huge data set that helped it to be accurate, that helped it to look across industries. And that is exactly the reason. And that also applies for corporates and organizations. So the more data we have, the more data-driven we are, the better our ability to kind of leverage those techniques and really use AI to a great extent. The next one is the proliferation of open source software and algorithms. I think this is also very important. Without having some of those large language models as open source, innovation would not have been accelerated in the same pace that it has. And I think that's a key part of what we're seeing at the moment. The next one is user-friendliness and the intuitiveness of the interface of ChatGPT and other large language models. I think this is one of the most fundamental things that we're seeing, because for the first time, we're seeing a chatbot that really, you can ask it so many kind of different questions without specifically training on every specific thing. That is what is truly remarkable. But the fact that you can ask more questions, and it's so intuitive, and it understands context, and it kind of reacts very quickly, I think is fundamentally kind of important. And we will see more and more adoption of those user interfaces across organizations. So not just in the banking space, I'm expecting that more corporates would adopt this user experience to access any kind of data in the organization. And we're seeing the introduction of ChatGPT and other large language models already in tools like, for example, business intelligence or BI tools and analytics. Consumption of those would definitely kind of be more and more used by chatbots and large language models. But even the Office suite and the way we're kind of interacting with tools like PowerPoint and Excel, with the introduction of Microsoft's Office 365 Copilot, we will see more adoption of those types of user experiences in the corporate setting to really interact with systems. And the way we're kind of working day to day in a few years from now can change and transform into something that is completely different, where we are talking to systems, talking to machines, instead of looking at data, ingesting data, but having something which is much more intuitive, like a chatbot, would probably kind of be much more widely adopted. And last but not least, accessibility of low and no code. I think this is also important, especially in the corporate setting, adopting those technologies in tools that really allows us to think differently, and instead of being very tacky, or you won't need a data scientist or an engineer to do some of those enablement of chatbots and other things. I think that's where the industry is going to, and I think we will see more and more of those. So if you think about terms like the citizen data scientist or citizen data steward, you would see more of those low code, no code kind of platforms helping people who are not coders to do tasks that usually were done by coders, and with that increase the adoption of innovation. I think that's going to definitely kind of increase in the next few years. We already saw it with many kind of areas, but we're going to see it much more broadly, I believe, in the coming years. So let's talk about Gen AI and where it could be used in the banking space. Now I will accelerate a little bit because I want to leave time for questions. I think one of the key kind of areas, starting from the top, from the left, one of the key kind of use cases, or group of use cases for generative AI, is obviously search and summarization. We will see much more of those interfaces in the banking space. For example, as we kind of generate reports or creating different types of documents, for example, credit memos and others, we will see much more of those search interfaces to look at data, for example, of a private company, generating all the data that we have, both from public sources, but maybe also from internally, and creating some kind of a template to allow banks to make better decisions. I think we will see more of those use cases. So thinking, for example, on a new client for a bank, I mean corporate client, build our ability to look at their financials, look at their kind of performance, what exists in the public data, and processing that along with things that we have internally, and creating a certain template, for example, that is required for regulatory purposes or any kind of business purpose, would be much more streamlined using generative AI, because its ability to look at a broad set of data sets and bring them into one single and coherent kind of answer, and combined with our ability to control the context and using RAG, for example, for vectorization and others, to make it more accurate and more structured, I think would go a long way and would definitely be one of the key use cases. The second one is really generating reports for clients, or our ability to generate, again, if the first one is more internal, the second one is really about how do we provide it for clients, enterprise or employee search mechanisms. This is, again, goes beyond the banking space, but our ability to provide to our employees a search mechanism where they can find data very easily is going to be very big. The next category is sales and marketing, which is also very important. Our ability to use, again, public data combined with internal data to make more personalized kind of sales messaging or marketing materials is going to be very big. We would be able to do a much more personalized, for example, customer content creation, as we kind of invite them to events or send them more information around products. Those can be much more personalized and much more easily with the introduction of generative AI techniques. New lead generation based on notes from sales calls. So as we talk to clients, our ability to immediately summarize it and make insights out of it is going to be quite big, and so on and so forth. The next one is customer engagement, which is really, we spoke about it, but I think generative AI can really help us to accelerate. So chatbots are going to be much more intelligent, much more personalized to the client. We're going to see much more kind of adoption of chatbots, especially now. Our ability to understand the sentiment and the intent of the client is going to be much better using LLMs. And we will be able to support our agents as they provide service with knowledge base to search immediately for data. So if you think about your interactions with customer support, regardless of the banking industry, in a lot of cases, the agent needs to kind of put you on pause, on wait, and kind of look for data. Nowadays, with generative AI, they would be able to kind of look for data much more quickly across, dozens of documents and knowledge bases. They will be able to very swiftly kind of provide you with the quickest answer. Things that relates to customer analytics, again, ingesting the data, generating kind of dashboards and analytics, as mentioned in the BI space, is going to be very big. Voice assistance for any kind of function within the organization, call center automation, and real-time translation. Even as we think about customer engagement, our ability to service them without necessarily kind of understanding the language is going to be also potentially quite powerful. I'm going to jump into software development just to accelerate. Software development, from my perspective, is going to be huge in terms of the adoption of Gen AI. Already now, with things like Microsoft Copilot, with GitHub Copilot, we see our ability to kind of create code faster. That there will be other tools that will help us to do even test generation for our code, to search for code much more easily, to do code migration, for example, from legacy systems and legacy code into newer, kind of more modern languages. So in our case, for example, where in the banking space, there's still a lot of mainframe systems, for example, with languages like COBOL and others, the ability to migrate those systems and their code base into kind of more modern languages like Java or Python or anything else would be much more kind of streamlined because of Gen AI and its ability to kind of migrate very quickly from one language to another. We will see more on documentation, so generating kind of and doing vulnerability testing, rewriting policies and standard based on this. So there's a lot of use cases in that space. So I want to finish with just discussing about the risks and the potential challenges of generative AI, and with that, and after that, we'll open it for questions. I think there's a few key risks that are important to kind of mention that would, I wouldn't say slow down, but definitely things that we're building in the banking industry to ensure that we can actually scale with generative AI. The first is really misinformation and hallucination. Obviously, super kind of critical. Until data is accurate, we cannot really kind of make decisions for clients. We have to make sure that we are capable of providing very accurate statements and decisions, and are capable also to trace those decisions back to the data. Those are key things that are still kind of challenging. There's a lot of research in this space, a lot of innovation in RAG and vectorization and how do we leverage kind of the context window and other things. There's many techniques and many technologies in this space, but still it's not yet mature in terms of how do we reduce the level of hallucinations and misinformation. Bias is another important thing. As mentioned, when we talk about AI for good, we have to remember that the ethical aspects of AI has to be at our key kind of the key pillars of our strategy in terms of AI. And in fact, Citi was one of the first banks to introduce a set of AI ethical principles already in 2019, one of the first banks to introduce ethical principles for AI. And bias was always in our one of the key pillars of that, and understanding how can we avoid any kind of discrimination or any kind of bias in terms of the decisions that AI is making. That is a huge kind of domain, obviously, in the AI space of how do we ensure that the data we're training on is not biased, because AI model, machine learning model cannot be as good and as neutral as the data that it relies on, obviously. So we have to comply with certain very strict standards in terms of how do we maintain the data that models are being trained on in order to ensure that we have limited bias. This is a very important one. The next one is data privacy, and that includes things when we think about, using Gen AI externally, so any kind of public generative AI model or internally, the data that is the models were trained on obviously can leak. So from that perspective, we have to make sure that both Citi data and client data does not leak into kind of other models and definitely not trained on, to protect our clients, but also to make sure that as we adopt technologies from the outside, no data of other clients that those models were trained on is kind of getting into Citi. We have to protect data privacy of our clients and prospects as well. So data privacy is becoming super important in the context of Gen AI. Security is also very important. I think a lot has been discussed on this, so I want to elaborate on how do we protect the models and how do we protect the data is super critical. And of course, last but not least, energy intensive. So it still requires quite a bit of compute power in order to train, fine tune. And how do we make sure that we're able to innovate in terms of energy consumption of training and inference and being able to reduce that. And this is something that we're working obviously very intensively with our partners to ensure that we can get the latest and greatest on that and ensure that we are not increasing the compute power in a way that is definitely affecting the environment. So I want to pause here and I want to open it up for questions. I'm sure there are a few, and obviously this is a super kind of interesting topic. So let's open it up for Q&A.
Nimrod, thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I appreciate all of the points that you covered, and it really, again, is a privilege for us to have you here today to educate us on AI and finance. I just want to, before we move to questions, point out what I thought were some really important insights. Because financial services is such a data-driven industry, that it truly is ripe for AI applications. And your discussion of the personalization of financial services and potential cost reductions in industry, I think, are really important in relation to AI for good. As we think about how AI can benefit society, one of the key areas that we'll focus on is financial inclusion. So allowing customers to make better decisions, enabling the bank to better tailor services to customers. These are really important points that AI can bring to the table as we think about support for sustainable development goals. And then just a couple of other points I thought were really important. You mentioned the reconciliation of transactions, and as a former trader and portfolio manager, I can really appreciate that point because, as you mentioned, the ability to cleanly and cost effectively and efficiently settle transactions reduces financial sector risk. So matching huge data sets, I think, is a really interesting and important part of that. And then finally, you mentioned fraud detection and error reduction. And again, I think this is a really important point and in relation to global risk management. So as you mentioned, Nimrod, the way we use AI in the financial sector will evolve over time, but those are some really important themes that you called out. I'm going to take the privilege of asking the first question to ask you a little bit more about your organization specifically, how you operate, how you innovate, how the team works together in artificial intelligence.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm happy to elaborate on that. So as mentioned at the beginning, the Innovation Labs is there to kind of work with all the business units of the bank. So it starts from the consumer, goes all the way to even our operations, our compliance organization, and finance, because AI is everywhere, right? So we can use it in all of our different functions. So the way we kind of working with them is really about understanding where can we explore data in a different way. I'm trying to look at AI not as something that is just a solution to a certain kind of specific kind of problem, but really thinking about how do we think differently about the usage of our data. So how can we become even an AI first kind of bank in terms of our thinking. So as we kind of introduce new products and new services, how do we think of AI being a fundamental part of all of this, and data more importantly? So it's kind of a different mindset. So the way we're working with different businesses is really, first of all, understanding their strategy, where do they want to be, and helping them even shape, especially nowadays, their kind of AI strategy. Where do they think their data can help them to make better decisions and improve their client experience and lead to, as you mentioned, all the kind of benefits from a AI for good perspective of financial inclusion and reduction of bias and improving the services and making them more accessible. I think those are the key kind of fundamental things that we're looking in their strategy. So being available in certain kind of key hubs of the company really helps us to do that, because I think, working with AI, especially in emerging tech, co-location is such an important thing. So having multidisciplinary team and cross-functional teams working together in an environment setting like the innovation labs or any kind of innovation hub that exists in the banking space, I think is truly kind of important. And if you add to it the ability to work with startup companies across the different kind of, areas of AI, from the technology stack to governance tools to specific kind of vertical solutions, that doesn't really matter. But bringing them over and working together with them to solve problems, that's kind of the mindset and the operational model that we have. And it really helps us to accelerate some of the innovation across kind of the different business units.
That's incredible, Nimrod. It sounds like you have an outstanding team there at Citi. And one of the things that you mentioned is having a cross-functional team and the importance of having those different types of expertise on your team. As we all are aware, it's extremely difficult to attract top-notch AI talent. AI being in such high demand and the growth of it being so prolific, as you mentioned. How do banks and financial institutions generally work to attract and retain AI talent in this highly competitive market?
That's a very good question. Thanks, Sarah. Attracting talent in this space is obviously difficult for everybody, right? So this is a challenge that we're seeing across industries, not just in the banking space. I think maybe for the banks, it's harder than the tech industry, maybe that is seeing as more maybe innovative in some ways. But I think one of the key things that we're trying to show is that Citi is very advanced in terms of the technologies that it's using, and that the opportunity with AI is huge. Because if you think about it, AI, again, as you mentioned, why is it so relevant for finance? It's so relevant for finance because of the huge amount of data that we collect and that we have. So the opportunity, especially in a large, global organization like Citi that is there in the bigger part of the world, the opportunity and the impact you can do by introducing AI in a large bank and institution like ours is absolutely remarkable. And I'm speaking on behalf of the industry with that, I would say, because again, banks have huge amounts of data sets, and AI can definitely help us to make better insights and improve the way we're kind of serving clients and really kind of, as you mentioned, serve broader kind of populations and really strive for kind of financial inclusion. I think AI can really help us with all of those things. So when we are kind of talking to talent and to potential candidates, we always talk about the data, we always talk about the opportunities, and we always talk about the impact. And I think that speaks to a lot of the younger generation or to any kind of expert in this space. The other things that, talk to them is really about working in this kind of, as mentioned, this setting of working, in innovation hubs, working closely with the business in cross-functional teams, working with startup companies, working with academic institutions. Those are definitely kind of also helpful as we try to attract talent. And other things that we need to remember, some of the challenges that we have today, especially with the more senior kind of researchers, when we talk about really senior researchers in the AI space, the ability to also, do publications and open source things are also very important. And the banks need to go more into that space. And we're already kind of seeing some steps to, contribute more to open source and be there and allow for the great talent to also publish their assets. Because if you think about it, especially in the AI space, this is their resume to a great extent. Their ability to show research, their ability to show code and novel kind of things that they contributed to the open source community is super important. So the banks need to really kind of go in that direction. And we're already kind of seeing steps, obviously, to be much more open. And of course, we need to remember that we're still a very regulated industry, which kind of prevents some of those things, some of them. But that's where we're pushing. We're pushing to make sure that we're very competitive in all those spaces to attract the best talent possible and bring them in this to this great journey that the banking industry is going through these days and years.
Well, that's wonderful, Nimrod. And I can see that you've been successful in attracting top talent to work with you and others at the bank. And I support your point about potential applicants understanding the opportunities to work at a large global bank like Citi with you and your excellent team. There are so many different things to learn and to engage in, and I'm sure that with your global reach, a potential AI applicant can really expand their career. So thank you for that. One thing I wanted to also ask you about as a policymaker and a former regulator and an attorney is about the regulation of the sector. And this is something that I've been focused on for quite a while, and I've taught in my class at Penn Law School the regulatory framework around the financial sector and how truly complex it is. It is an industry that is maturing, and there's a great deal of regulation, everything from on the securities and investor protection side, with capital markets regimes and consumer protection regimes. And then on the banking side, of course, capital and liquidity requirements, and other risk management and cybersecurity requirements. So Citi being a large global bank, you, I'm sure, and your team are highly aware of really all aspects of the regulatory regime. But AI is about innovation, and it's about improving financial inclusion and improving the efficiency of the sector. So I wanted to ask you about that. How do you and how does Citi innovate in such a highly regulated environment?
Absolutely. It's a great question and obviously very relevant and important. Thanks, Sarah. I think, and I can talk about it for a long time, but I will try to kind of summarize. I think, first of all, yes, we are in a very kind of regulated environment. I think with AI in general, this is still being developed. Obviously, we're all kind of seeing what different countries, specifically in the US, is happening and what recently was announced by the current administration. And I think it would definitely kind of evolve. Is just it's a journey. We're not sure yet how will it develop. I'm sure that the regulatory landscape would definitely kind of be enhanced in the coming years globally, but also in the US specifically. We will see much more kind of countries that are either introducing principles or an actual kind of law for protecting consumers with anything that is related to AI. And I think from our perspective, we are looking forward to it, and we're engaging with the regulators to better understand their kind of thoughts and directions. It's important for us to still not stop innovation. We're working on adopting AI, obviously, with all the kind of risk and control and compliance in mind, and our experience with deploying AI for the last few years. So nothing is new on that. But I think generative AI has definitely kind of pushed things and would definitely kind of lead to more to the improvement and to the kind of extension of the current regulatory landscape. If we think about the experience from digital assets and blockchain technologies, from social media, from internet, definitely there was some lessons learned and on the understanding of how to approach it across kind of many countries. So I'm definitely expecting a lot of development in that space. And I think one of the key things that I'm telling all of my employees and to my partners in the company is that the regulation is so important in order to ensure that there are guardrails and in order to help us accelerate innovation, not stop it. The important point is when you have the right foundation, you can actually run faster because things are clear, because you have the right tools, because you have the right path to push things forward. And it would definitely kind of help to ensure that people are much more confident that they have the right controls to accelerate the innovation with AI, not vice versa. So from my perspective, I'm always kind of trying to explain how important it is to have regulation to protect the consumers. And with AI specifically, it's so important because it's so hard to explain, for example, how a certain decision has been made with some techniques. If you look at large language models and Gen AI, sometimes with some of the text that is being introduced, it's so hard to explain how exactly and based on what data certain text was kind of generated. And our ability to develop that and ensure that we can control the data, that we can trace back to decisions to data is so important for us to protect consumers and protect our clients, that definitely we look forward to partner even further with the regulators to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nimrod. And I appreciate your point about partnering with the regulators. This is such an important and fast-moving technology that those ongoing conversations with regulators and policymakers are important for education, I think, on both sides. And I also appreciate your point about some similarities or parallels with other emerging technologies that we've seen, like blockchain, for example. Both are global technologies, certainly. And so we have the opportunity and challenge not only of regulating at the national level, but of thinking about collaboration and cooperation across borders and how global standard setting works. So for Citi, a global giant like you, I think it's really beneficial for the regulators and the standard setters that you're willing and able to actively engage and help bring people to the table to talk about some of the challenges in the industry. I also look forward to seeing how parties will move forward on these discussions. I think it's a great opportunity, as you say, to really think about how we can optimize and leverage the use of the technology to really benefit consumers and to increase financial inclusion in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. So again, thank you for that. Nimrod, there are so many complexities around dealing with artificial intelligence. And Citi being such a large institution with so many important functions, you must have so many considerations as you and your team being the epicenter of innovation on this technology at the bank. How do you think about your priorities when you're driving your AI strategy in the industry? How do you craft that, and how do you implement it across the bank?
That's a very good question. Thanks, Sarah. So in terms of priorities in the AI space, we have to remember that, again, maybe unlike some of the other emerging technologies, AI can be used everywhere, right? So wherever there is data and there's some decisions to be made, there's probably some techniques that could be used. And the amount of use cases is absolutely phenomenal. And we have to prioritize, obviously. We have to prioritize because our resources are limited, obviously, but we also have to prioritize because we need, again, to take it in a gradual kind of approach and not have it everywhere in a way that does not kind of necessarily have all the kind of governance that we need. So from that perspective, we're looking at, for example, in the generative AI space, we're definitely looking at benefits. So what is the impact of some of the use cases as we kind of explore them in terms of cost reduction, in terms of risk reduction, in terms of revenue generating. So what are the key benefits for it, for the bank, for the clients, and what kind of investment obviously is required? When we're also looking at kind of the risks, right? So what are the risks associated with any kind of use case? So for example, things that relate to making credit decisions for clients are not the same as, providing some kind of a knowledge-based search mechanism for, back office employees, something that does not necessarily lead to making decisions. So we definitely think about how close it is to the client, what are the different sets of risks that are associated with it, combined with the benefits. And this helps us to kind of prioritize across, within business units and across business units to make sure that we're tackling the first kind of set of use cases that are much more impactful first, and then continuing gradually. But that said, the important thing is not to just, and there's a lot of discussions about how corporates and banks should address generative AI, because again, the interest is so great. And taking a more centralized approach versus a completely decentralized approach, it's a huge debate also in the industry. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. So you need to have the right guardrails, the right controls to also ensure you have some kind of an ability to federate and to scale. Because if everything's centralized, then you're not making it as an embedded part of every part of the organization. So some hybrid models, I think, would prevail in the future, where there's some level of governance, and especially with the lack of a more robust kind of regulatory environment, combined with some more federation and more kind of decentralized approach to allow for scaling, but again, with the right kind of guardrails and controls in place to ensure that this is applied in a safe way.
Yeah, that's really important, Nimrod. I appreciate what you said about how close something is to the customer, and that helps inform your decision and your AI strategy, because that's really central to what we're doing in financial services, is serving the customers, providing financial services, working to increase financial inclusion. So thank you for that. We have a question in the chat. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask at a high level a little bit more about the technology, and recognizing that you have a number of proprietary uses at Citi, a little bit more about how the models work. I think it would be really excellent for us to learn from you what you're able to share about large language models, those being the focus of a lot of the policymaking activity around AI. And one of the questions and the issues that you mentioned, Nimrod, relates to bias. So to the extent that you're able to comment a bit on how the models work, and how you think about bias, and how the bank thinks about governance in relation to that, please, we welcome what you're able to share on that.
Sure, absolutely. So, and I think it's a good question. Obviously, all the banks are still kind of developing their strategies in terms of how do they work with generative AI, whether it's just to rely on the commercial kind of, solutions like ChatGPT by OpenAI or with Microsoft, or building their own. And some have already kind of announced their models based on internal kind of large language models that are trained. Now, the usage of large language models does not necessarily require training. Obviously, even internal kind of open source solutions could be used for a variety of use cases in a pretty accurate manner. And again, using some techniques we could reduce the level of hallucinations and misinformation that is being introduced. So obviously, as innovation labs, we are researching all the different options, both kind of experimenting with open source, but also with the more commercial ones, to ensure that we have the latest and greatest and the more accurate and more, let's say, mature solutions that we're picking up for our clients. So this is still kind of in research and in evaluation. So nothing yet is concrete. So I wish there was a clear strategy that I can share in terms of how do we do that, but this is still kind of in development. And when it comes to bias, I think, and ethical principles, again, we were one of the first to say this is critical for us to set a set of ethical principles as we kind of work on this. And the ethical principles help us to ensure that in every stage of the life cycle of an AI or a machine learning model, that we're thinking about those things, that we're thinking about the data, that we're introducing the right level of governance and controls in place, and really helped us to do that even before generative AI. I think specifically on generative AI, it was not resolved yet. So there's no one clear kind of way of how to do it, because the whole value of large language models, if you think about it, is the fact that they were trained on huge kind of data sets. The ability to train huge data sets almost contradicts with data quality, because if you want to control the data quality, you cannot train on the entire internet, obviously. So that is a very fundamental kind of problem. I wouldn't say problem, but it's a fundamental kind of challenge that we have on how do we control bias and the data quality in large language models. Large corporates can definitely kind of retrain and ensure that we're making it more accurate, but original data sets were definitely kind of not really controlled in terms of data quality. So it's really, really, really hard to completely eliminate kind of bias when you think about it with all those foundational models. That said, there are some techniques to, again, do post kind of, let's say, processing and different management on the prompts to ensure that bias is being kind of eliminated or reduced. But it's still, I would say, across the industry, and as you can imagine, this is something that we're very actively kind of looking into how do we solve it. And there's research obviously in this space from our perspective. It's not yet mature in the industry that I can say this is how in the future banks are going to kind of reduce bias completely by leveraging LLMs in a very safe way. There's still not clear kind of strategy for that, but we're again partnering with different kind of vendors, companies, partners to ensure that we are there on the kind of latest and greatest in terms of the research in this space, so that it will help us leverage LLMs in use cases where bias is a key kind of thing and a key kind of challenge.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Nimrod. I think the approach of the bank is very robust, and I look forward to hearing more about that. And as you said, it's definitely a fast-moving area, and so the approach of modeling and the approach to bias and governance will certainly evolve. And for those of us working with AI for Good and working with the United Nations on governance matters, it's the area of bias is certainly something that's a key focus. We're almost out of time. I wanted to ask one more question from the chat about Citi's global approach, and the questions that have come in around regulation and considerations with governance, for example, are a challenge to manage across many different countries. And we talked about this earlier in the webcast as well. For you and your team focused on the innovation and technology side, how do you collaborate with the regulatory side of the bank to work towards compliance or be better informed about regulatory approaches of the many companies that Citi operates in? And for example, we have the work that's being done in the European Union around the EU AI Act, with more news coming out about that today. So staying on top of those issues is certainly crucial to the bank, and I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how you collaborate with the regulatory and policy side on those issues.
Absolutely. So first of all, as you can imagine, with a large bank like ours, we have regulatory teams that are working closely with the regulators and ensuring that we are up to speed with the developments, obviously, in that space. In addition to that, we introduced in 2021 the AI Center of Excellence, which I lead. That part of its mission is really to also include those views and those latest kind of developments into this committee that helps to make decisions based on that and really inform the entire organization. So the AI Center of Excellence, for example, is a group of practitioners from across the different functions of the organization, not just business functions, but also compliance and legal and risk organizations. And together with the regulatory engagements kind of teams who are updating regularly as part of these forums, we're able to make decisions and kind of both ensure that we are responding to different kind of questions coming to us from regulators, involving the right people in regulatory engagements in each one of those kind of countries that are developing either kind of principles or actual kind of laws with AI, and really kind of ensuring that Citi is informed and makes the best decisions based on those things. So this structure really kind of helps us to ensure that on a global level, we're capable of both kind of understanding what happens in every country and region, but also address any kind of specific need with the right kind of level of expertise and seniority.
Well, that's wonderful, Nimrod. Thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing a conversation with you about these issues and appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you as we move forward on our own work at Wharton and our own regulatory engagement. I want to thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank Ryan Hard and the folks at AI for Good for the opportunity for us to be here today to launch our series on AI and finance. And I appreciate the chance to be here with Nimrod Barak, the global head of Citi Innovation Labs and Citi's Emerging Technologies Center of Excellence. Nimrod, thank you so much for your time. We learned a lot today, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the eShop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.
The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.